You know that feeling when you're standing at the edge of something huge, like your entire future, and the man you love is holding a piece of paper that feels less like a contract and more like a warning? My name is Clara. I'm 32, and 3 years ago I was ready to marry the man I thought was my soulmate, Alex. He was charming, successful, and the kind of guy who filled a room with his confidence. Span zero, but on the eve of our wedding, his confidence turned into a cold, hard demand. Clara, he said, pushing a thick manila envelope across the dining table, I need you to sign this prenup. No arguments. It's non-negotiable or the wedding is off. He called it protecting his future assets. He didn't know he was writing the clause that would protect mine and cost him everything. This isn't just a story about a prenup. It's about what happens when arrogance meets cosmic karma, and how a tiny, forgotten detail on a legal document can hold the weight of $5 million. I met Alex when I was 28, fresh out of business school and grinding away at a small marketing firm. He was a successful and slightly arrogant venture capitalist. He dealt in millions and seemed to view every relationship, including ours, as a strategic investment. He was definitely the catch in our social circle. Handsome, a killer smile, and enough disposable income to make our life comfortable. For a while, our life was a beautiful fantasy. Weekend trips to Napa, fancy dinners, and the kind of effortless ease I'd always dreamed of. When he proposed on a private yacht at sunset, I thought my life was finally perfect. We set the date for 9 months later. I planned everything down to the last rose petal. The first crack appeared 2 weeks before the wedding. We were having dinner, reviewing the final seating chart when he dropped the legal bomb. My lawyer drew up a prenuptial agreement, he announced, not looking up from his steak. I need you to sign it by Monday. My stomach immediately plummeted. A prenup, Alex? Why? We're marrying for life. He finally looked up, and the look in his eyes wasn't the loving gaze of a fiancé. It was the sharp, calculating stare of a man closing a business deal. Clara, be realistic. My firm is about to close a massive funding round. I'm looking at potential assets in the tens of millions within the next 5 years. I worked hard for that. It's only sensible to protect it. It's for my peace of mind. I tried to argue. I reminded him of the love we shared, the promises we made, but he was immovable. Look, if you trust me, you'll sign it. If you don't, then maybe we shouldn't get married at all. That hurt deeply. But I loved him, or at least I loved the idea of him and the life we were building. I felt cornered, humiliated, but I also didn't want to lose him over a piece of paper. I was emotionally invested, and he knew it. I eventually agreed, but only after demanding I have my own lawyer review the document. Alex scoffed but conceded. My lawyer, a sharp-as-a-tack woman named Alina, took one look at the document and frowned. Clara, this is heavily skewed in his favor. It essentially classifies everything he earns, invests, or inherits as his separate property. I asked her to focus on the future. Is there anything in here about unexpected income, like a lottery win or a surprise inheritance? Alina scanned the asset definition clause. She found a section that was hilariously overdetailed. It listed every single possible source of income imaginable. Stocks, bonds, intellectual property, future bonuses, trust funds, even royalties from any potentially marketable artistic endeavors. But there was a subtle loophole. A common mistake in overly complex contracts. Look at this, Alina pointed. Clause 4 billion, future assets and acquisitions. It lists everything but an unsourced, non-professional financial windfall. You know, like a prize, a sweepstakes, or a lottery jackpot. She explained that because Alex's lawyer had focused so heavily on business and professional income, they'd missed the non-traditional, pure luck windfalls. Anything won by chance was technically not listed as his separate property under the current drafting. Alex, the master negotiator who thought he'd considered every financial angle, had completely overlooked the random factor of pure luck. It was perfect. I looked at Alina and a small, cold smile touched my lips. Don't change a thing, I'll sign it. The day before the wedding, I signed the prenuptial agreement. Alex didn't even read the final version. He just celebrated his perceived victory, confident he had protected his millions from the risk of me. Life with Alex was good, if predictable. He was a great provider, but our relationship felt less like a passionate marriage and more like a successful, long-term merger. We had the beautiful house, the fancy cars, the whole 9 yards. I continued to work, focusing on my career and saving diligently. But as the years went on, a subtle truth began to surface. Alex's arrogance hadn't softened with marriage. He rarely asked about my work, never truly listened to my ideas, and constantly treated our shared life as a backdrop for his achievements. He often belittled my smaller salary and reminded me, casually, about the prenup, always concluding, "You know, if anything ever happened, you'd be fine, but my future is secure." His words, intended to reassure himself, only hammered home the transactional nature of our union. I was part of his perfectly curated life, but I was replaceable. I was the safe bet. Then, 3 years into the marriage, everything changed with a quick stop at a local convenience store. It was a Tuesday afternoon. A dreary, forgettable day. I'd gone out to pick up milk and decided on a complete whim to buy a quick-pick lottery ticket. I hadn't played since college. It was just a silly moment of impulse. That night, I was sitting on the couch, half watching a rerun when the news flashed the winning numbers. I pulled the ticket out of my wallet, not expecting anything, and started checking them off one by one. The first 3 matched, then the 4th. Then the 5th. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I checked the Powerball number. It matched. I had won not just a couple of bucks, the jackpot, a cool $5 million. I sat there staring at the slip of paper, the numbers blurring, a cold sense of calm washing over me. This wasn't a windfall, it was a lifeboat. The escape hatch Alex never knew I had. I did not scream. I did not jump up and down. I walked to the safe, tucked the winning ticket inside a plastic sleeve, and locked it away. When Alex came home an hour later, full of self-important chatter about a new acquisition, I was calm, perhaps too calm. "Rough day, honey?" he asked, barely glancing at me. "Not rough," I replied, a small, knowing smile on my face. "Just productive." Over the next few weeks, I kept the secret. I went to work, I cooked dinner, I listened to Alex talk about his potential millions, all while knowing I was the one sitting on a mountain of cash. I was a spy in my own house. I quietly consulted Alina, my divorce lawyer. I showed her the ticket. She smiled a genuine, victorious smile. "Clara, this is perfect. Absolutely perfect. We're going to proceed with a faultless divorce. We're not going to mention the lottery win until the final stages. Let him cling to the illusion of control." I followed her advice. I went through the motions with Alex, but my patience for his arrogance evaporated. Every slight, every dismissive comment, every casual reminder of my lesser financial status fueled my resolve. One evening, Alex, flush with wine, looked at me and said, "You know, sometimes I think you're too soft for this life, Clara. I worry about you surviving without me." I smiled sweetly. "Don't worry, Alex, I'll survive. And sometimes," I added, looking him right in the eye, "the soft ones are the sharpest." The turning point was slow and agonizingly deliberate. I started separating myself emotionally and practically. I opened a new bank account in a different state, transferring my personal savings, which the prenup explicitly allowed. I began discreetly moving my own art and family heirlooms out of the house. Alex noticed the change, but interpreted it through his lens of self-importance. "You've been distant lately, Clara," he observed. "Are you feeling stressed? Maybe you need a spa day. You know, you shouldn't let your little job overwhelm you." I finally saw him for what he was, utterly self-absorbed, blinded by the belief that his money and his prenup gave him dominion over everything, including my emotions. He thought I was just having a bad patch that his wallet could fix. I knew I couldn't live like this anymore. I set the stage for the divorce. I approached him one Saturday morning, dressed impeccably and holding a small envelope. It wasn't the prenup, it was the divorce papers Alina had meticulously prepared. "Alex," I said, my voice calm, "I want a divorce." He laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "A divorce? Over what?" "A disagreement over the seating chart." "Don't be ridiculous, Clara. I'm busy. We can talk about this later." I placed the envelope in front of him. "No, we can talk about it now. I'm done. I'm leaving. These are the papers." His face finally registered shock, then anger. "Leaving? Where are you going to go, Clara? You know the prenup covers this. You get a lump sum, the car you came in with, and that's it. You won't touch my assets. You signed it." "Yes, Alex," I replied, meeting his furious gaze with serene calm. "I signed it, but funny enough, I want the divorce to be faultless. No drama, we'll stick to the prenuptial agreement." His confidence immediately returned. He saw the prenup as his ultimate shield, his safety net. Fine, he sneered, picking up the pen. You want out, you're out. Let's do this clean. You know what you're entitled to. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Within a week, I was gone. I moved into a chic, temporary apartment downtown, a place Alex never would have expected. His lawyer, a stern man named Richard, contacted a lender, agreeing to the lump sum and the property division based strictly on the prenup. They were thrilled, believing they'd won without a fight. And then, I waited. For 3 weeks, I let Alex and his legal team feel safe, comfortable, and triumphant. The day came for the final settlement conference. Alex walked into the conference room with Richard radiating smug victory. He barely looked at me. Let's get this over with, Alex said, leaning back in his chair. Just the signatures on the release forms and we're done. Eleanor smiled at me. Actually, Alex, before we sign the final forms, my client has a small, final disclosure to make. A newly acquired asset, something we need to include on the Schedule A of marital property. Alex waved his hand dismissively. What? A new set of earrings just listed under personal effects. I don't care. Eleanor placed a laminated piece of paper in the middle of the table. It was a copy of the $5 million winning lottery ticket with the official certification attached. The silence in the room was immediate and absolute. Richard, Alex's lawyer, picked up the paper, read it, and slowly lowered it, his face turning the color of bad milk. Alex stared at the ticket, then at me, then back at the ticket. His jaw worked, but no words came out. He looked like a statue realizing it was about to crumble. $5 million, Eleanor stated, her voice sharp and precise. Acquired during the marriage. Legally, under community property law, Alex, you are entitled to 50% of that money. Chaos erupted. Alex finally found his voice, a high-pitched, incredulous scream. The lottery, you won the lottery. Why didn't you tell me? You hid this. I didn't hide it, I replied, calm and steady. I simply didn't mention it until the appropriate time. You were a little busy getting your future assets secured, remember? Richard, the lawyer, finally found his professional demeanor. He cleared his throat, pushing the winning ticket back towards Eleanor. This is preposterous. We have a legally binding prenuptial agreement that clearly defines all assets acquired during the marriage, and it's all separate property. Is it, Richard? Eleanor asked sweetly, pulling out a copy of the original prenup. Let's review Clause 4 billion future assets and acquisitions. The one you drafted. Eleanor, the legal shark, read the clause aloud, detailing how everything from future stock options, patent royalties, professional fees, investment profits, and business windfalls was Alex's separate property. She read the list slowly, emphasizing every word. When she finished, she smiled. Now, Richard, show me where in this exhaustive, expertly drafted document the term lottery jackpot, prize winnings, or unsourced financial windfall based purely on chance is listed as Alex's separate property. Richard frantically skimmed the clause, his eyes darting back and forth. His breathing became labored. He knew the terms of art. He knew the definition of professional income and asset acquisition. The clause, designed to protect Alex's professional endeavors, was silent on the matter of pure luck. It was a beautiful, arrogant oversight. It is implicitly covered, Richard stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. It falls under the general definition of marital acquisition. Implicitly, Eleanor countered, pulling out a precedent case I'd studied. Your client's intent, as established in the rest of this meticulous document, was to separate assets based on his professional skill and earnings. A Powerball ticket is an act of God, Richard. The intent of this clause was clearly to exclude assets generated without the direct application of professional acumen. Richard was speechless. Alex, meanwhile, was turning purple. You knew, he raged, pointing a trembling finger at me. You planned this. You used my own lawyer's mistake against me. I simply signed the document you demanded, Alex, I countered, the years of suppressed frustration finally escaping with controlled force. You were so focused on protecting the assets you hadn't even earned yet that you forgot about the value of what you already had. And you certainly didn't value me enough to ensure our marriage was a true partnership. Eleanor delivered the final blow. Richard, if you contest this, we will drag this $5 million through the courts. It will cost your client an exorbitant amount in legal fees. Furthermore, we will expose the details of your firm's own drafting oversight, which I imagine will have significant professional consequences for you. The threat of professional embarrassment was enough to stop Richard cold. He looked at Alex, then back at the document. He was trapped. The arrogant exclusion of a random asset had come back to bite them with a vengeance. Richard swallowed hard. My client. My client will agree to the terms. The settlement was swift and brutal for Alex. He got the lump sum as agreed, and I kept my $5 million. The man who had feared his assets would be compromised by my presence ended up watching half of the only significant marital asset acquired by me slip through his hands. The irony was thicker than the air in that conference room. I left that day, not with a small check and a sense of defeat, but with an immense fortune and a dignity that was finally my own. I had signed his document, but I played by my own rules. Alex, of course, tried to make a scene in the court hallways, yelling about betrayal and how I was a gold digger. I simply looked him dead in the eye and said, "Alex, you wrote the rules of this game. You were just too arrogant to read the fine print." He lost more than half a lottery win that day. He lost the comfortable, predictable life he had taken for granted, and he lost his belief in his own invincibility. With the money, I didn't splurge on a mansion or a yacht. I took my time. I invested wisely, paid off all my existing debt, and set up a foundation to help women escape financially abusive relationships. I even treated Alina to a vacation. She earned it. 3 years later, my life is unrecognizable. I left the corporate grind and started my own boutique consulting firm. I now deal in the millions, but I do it with integrity and a profound respect for every clause on every contract. Alex, I hear he's still with his lawyer. Not as a client, but as a low-level paralegal after the fallout of his oversight cost Richard his firm's reputation. He's still chasing millions, but now he's doing it for someone else. The house is mine now. The energy inside it is completely different. It's no longer the stage for his performance, it's my sanctuary. Sometimes, when I'm having my morning coffee, I look out the window and remember that Tuesday afternoon. I remember the arrogance in his voice, the demand for the prenup, and the cold, calculating look in his eyes. And I realize that all the financial planning in the world can't account for simple, unadulterated luck. My luck. The lesson I learned. Never let anyone define your worth with a legal document. Sign the paper if you must, but always know the power of your own potential and always read the fine print. Because sometimes, the most rigid protection you can offer yourself is the one they are too arrogant to notice.